All right, finally, the last set of things that we need to talk about that's really just a list of vocabulary words. So we're going to go through the foundations of American democracy, find out what is unique about America's democratic government. First, we just have this list of vocabulary terms that we're going to use throughout the year. These are concepts that describe principles of America's democracy. So first, we've got the idea of popular sovereignty. Don't mix this up with your United States history stuff. All we mean here is that the government is supposed to serve the will of the people. The government gets its power from the consent of the people who are governed. So we have a government that's designed to do what the people want it to do. The second concept there is the rule of law. This is particularly important in a democracy. What this means is that all individuals, including government officials especially, are subject to the law. So the government officials don't get to act outside the law. They have to follow the laws themselves. And in our government, what's important is that the offices are what hold the power. Donald Trump or Barack Obama have no power on their own, but the office of the President of the United States comes with considerable powers that can be exercised. Next, we've got limited government. All this really means is that the government only has the amount of power that we allow it to have. We have specific written limits about powers that the government does not possess. And we'll go through those later. A lot of those we'll find in the Bill of Rights and in the Constitution. But we have a written contract that stops the government from having certain powers over us. These next two go together often, but we got to make sure we can articulate these. The separation of powers just means that we've got three different branches. An important thing about these branches is that there are different people in these branches. A person cannot be a member of Congress and also on the Supreme Court. A Supreme Court justice cannot also serve as president. We have different groups of people that hold these powers, and in that way, they're more likely to struggle with each other for political power. And when these branches are fighting with each other, one thing they're not doing is working together to oppress the people. So this is a system that helps to limit the government's power. And then with separation of powers, we have checks and balances, and these are specifically spelled out in the Constitution, and there are some more modern ones. But this means that each of our individual branches has power that only limit the power of another branch. So they're able to make sure that the other branches don't exceed their role or do anything that they're not supposed to do. But there are specific powers, something like you're probably familiar with the veto. If Congress passes a law, the president can reject that law, and that prevents Congress from being able to pass laws that would upset the people or would limit the president's power or something like that. And then finally, not quite in the Constitution, we have judicial review. We'll get into this a lot later, but this is just the idea that the courts look at the words of the Constitution and the laws, and the courts are who decide whether or not the acts of government are constitutional or not. They have the ability to strike down a law that is unconstitutional. Another important concept in American democracy is that it works together with the market-based economy. So our economic system is based on a free enterprise economy. It's not purely operating that way, but we do have these basic principles that the government has to respect. So we've got private property instead of the government owning everything. We have private decisions made. Individuals make their own economic decisions, and businesses do as well, not the government. You decide what products to buy and consume. The government doesn't often tell you what those are. We have a competitive system where producers are competing with each other to reach the most consumers. And we have a system where economic incentives, usually money and profit, are what drive economic performance. And it's rarely government directives that tell the economy what to do. However, to adapt to a more modern situation, our government is a lot more involved in the economy than these rules would suggest. The government does a lot to protect consumers, right? An example right now is we have the FDA that prevents just anybody from creating a medicine and saying, here's this medicine that solves all these problems, but the FDA will make sure that it's tested and that it's not going to cause side effects and things like that. The government promotes competition. The government tries to prevent monopolies from occurring. And so sometimes it will force a company to break up into smaller companies or things like that in order to create a more competitive system. The government will definitely incentivize certain economic activity. You guys are drivers now. So the state of Tennessee has passed a law that tells you have to have car insurance in order to drive a car. That would be an example of government kind of forcing or incentivizing an economic activity on you. You're not going to go to jail if you don't have insurance, but you will have to pay an extra fine. The government definitely provides some public goods like fire protection, police protection, those things that businesses wouldn't necessarily make a lot of profit on. So there aren't a lot of entrepreneurs that try to do those things. The government provides public goods like parks and roads and things like that. The government's also going to make policies about how things can be produced. We may limit certain types of materials that can be used. We don't have lead in paint anymore. We may we may create rules about how much pollution can be allowed while manufacturing and things like that. And the government definitely incentivizes what it wants consumers to do. When the economic downturn first started with the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic, one of the things that the government did is it was worried about economic collapse, and so it stimulated the economy by sending $1,200 checks to each tax-paying American. The whole point of those checks is to get you to go out and spend it at local restaurants or small businesses and things like that to help keep the economy afloat. And in that way, government can take action to influence the decision that consumers would make. Okay, so those are just some basic principles of what come together to make up America's unique system of democracy. We'll talk some more about this later this week.